Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss Office Space, starring Ron Livingston, Jennifer Aniston, David Herman, AJ Naidoo, Diedrich Bader, Stephen Root, and Gary Cole, directed by the creators of Beavis and Butthead and co-creator of King of the Hill, Mike Judge. Now, I have seen this movie many times, but I didn't go to theaters for this, but I remember hearing about it on a VHS commercial. I won't say what VHS, but I remember I was interested in this movie because of that advertisement. And what do I think of it? Well, it's about to be the same as what I think of it now. Let's get into the movie. While on the way to work, Peter Gibbons, played by Ron Livingston, is stuck in traffic as his friends Michael Bolton, not related to the singer, played by David Herman, while listening to rap music, and Samir, played by AJ Naidoo, forgive me if I said that wrong, hating the traffic on the freeway as Milton, played by Stephen Root, takes the bus to work at Enitech, which is where they all work with a selfless boss named Bill Lumberg, played by Gary Cole, and everybody gets to Enitech and they sit in a cubicle all day long, which is a job I would personally hate in general, as Peter hears a monitoring woman named Nina saying the same line over and over again. And I should just stop right there for just 1 minute. This movie is based on a series of shorts called Milton, or maybe it was one short, I don't know, that Mike Judge wrote a long time ago. But yeah, that's why there's a character in this movie called Milton that's based on what this movie's about. As Bill comes up to Peter's cubicle to tell him about the TPS reports. As Bill sometimes goes like, yeah, every 2 seconds, as he also hears Milton's radio and asks him to turn it down while he has a meltdown. And these characters are hilarious. As Gary Cole delivers his best performance as Bill Lumberg, as that's a character I remember forever as his assistant manager Dom asking the same question about the TPS reports as Samir is having a troubling time with the copy machine and he wants to beat the shit out of it, while Michael is asked if he's related to the singer with a similar name, but he says it's just a coincidence. As Peter wants to get some coffee while Peter has a case of the Mondays at a restaurant, and this dialogue is absolutely memorable as it cracks me the fuck up. Tom Sunkowski tells Peter, Michael, and Samir about the staff meeting later in the week about how they'll get laid off by Bill, and Tom gets back to Initech and chats with them about an idea, and he had that would have made him a millionaire called Jumping to Conclusions, and Michael ends up with the paper jam like Samir did earlier and accidentally breaks the machine. And Peter comes home to his neighbor Lawrence, played by Diedrich Bader, showing him on the TV a naked woman, and Peter asks him about the case on the Mondays. And these characters are very relatable. Even Lawrence, who comes off like a hippie, who works at a construction job for what little he does in this movie, this character is hilarious, as he reminds me of that 70s show when we get introduced to, what's his name? Leo the Dude Man in that 70s show, who's been played by Tommy Chong in that show. As Peter moves on to a Friday in a staff meeting where they get a consultant named Bob Slidell. And the ironic thing is, coming up later in with another person we'll get to later in the show, as Peter talks with Milton about how they kept moving his desk and to avoid getting asked by Bill to work over the weekend, Peter does, but he doesn't make it in time and gets asked it anyways. And Bill asks everybody to come into work 7 days a week, which can break a law for making his employees work at least 60 hours a week instead of 40. And they do get paid for that, or do they? If not, that doesn't make sense. And director Mike Judge makes this movie absolutely genius as far as his writing goes, as well as his directing. Peter meets with his girlfriend Am, whom he believes is cheating on him, as she forces him to a hypnotherapist as he dies right in front of him and doesn't feel like coming into work the next day. And Bill calls his machine nonstop and says, "Yeah, hi, it's Bill Lumberg," which never fails to amuse me, as Gary Cole is the best performance throughout the movie, in my opinion. As Anne does call Peter eventually to dump his ass over the phone and yells at him about how she's been cheating on him. And he gets the girl of his dreams, who happens to be a waitress while working at Tchotchke's, named Joanna, played by Jennifer Aniston, while his coworkers get interviewed by Bob. And here's the ironic thing that I should have brought up before about his cold consultant, Bob Porter, as his first name is also Bob, and that cracks me up as the score is typical 1990s, but I'm okay with it. While the shots were great for a 1990s comedy about work, which is the thing about the 90s, which I miss those days. And as you can tell, I'm a 90s kid, so what do you want me to tell you? Peter has lunch with Joanna at the place next door called Flingers as she talks about her pieces of flair, and she asks Peter what he does at Initech as he explains things the financial way. As he says he doesn't like his job, nor is he ever going back there ever again, and wants to date Joanna. Meanwhile, Bill thinks about taking Milton's stapler away from Milton, while Bill moves his desk once again as far away from the others, and Milton thinks about setting the building on fire as Peter comes in to get his address book and meets the Bobs, excuse me, and has an interview with them as he talks brutally honest with them about how his days, as he doesn't give a shit about his job, as they believe he's upper management material. While he avoids Bill as he leaves the building, and Joanna has a word with her boss named Stan, played by the movie's director Mike Judge, about her flair, as he wants her to express herself. Yeah, that's bullshit. And Bill and Don talks with the Bobs about the layoffs and talk about Peter's position at Initech and wants to put him up to upper management. And I really like how unforgettable the lines by these actors are, and the music choices are well done for a type of genre, as I was never a big fan of this kind of humor, which is the R-rated comedy raunchy humor kind of bullshit. But this movie works as the type of movie in general. Peter takes matters into his own hands and takes down his cubicle to look outside the window as Bill comes up to Peter and tries to talk with him about his TPS reports. As Peter turns them in, and he suddenly has a meeting with the Bobs a minute later, and Bill makes matters worse by moving Milton downstairs while laying off Michael and Samir at the end of the week, and Peter gets promoted to upper management, which is fucked up in so many different ways. As Peter wants to give Initech the virus by asking Michael about it, and tells Michael about how he's getting laid off, while Peter is getting promoted and involves Samir into this. And at this point, I'm having a great time with the movie, as this is a hell of a lot of fun. Michael and Samir plant the virus to Initech, as their coworker Drew tells them about Tom's accident with a drunk driver, while at first he was committing suicide. While the drunk driver slams into Tom, meanwhile, Peter steals the printer from Initech, as Michael and Samir smash the machine, which is the best scene in the whole movie. That hell, even Family Guy did the same thing with Brian and Stewie stealing the record Surfing Bird by the Trashmen and getting it destroyed by them. But Michael and Samir celebrate with Peter their last day at Initech, and Joanna comes over to sleep over and go to Tom's barbecue while going over what they're doing, which makes them look like thieves, and the acting by Ron Livingston is convincing me he's a goddamn thief. Peter gets to Tom's place with Joanna, as does Michael and Samir, and shows him the jump to conclusion mat, which was something I brought up in the beginning of the movie. And Tom is crippled because of the accident and walks outside to look for Joanna. And Peter walks outside to look for Joanna, bumps into Drew, as he learns she slept with Bill Lumberg, as that'll be wrong later on. And they get in the car and talk about it as she breaks up with Peter, and that night comes and sees Bill shirtless humping Joanna's ass, which looks fucking disturbing. And that is something I never want my mind on ever again, while Joanna has a word with Stan, her boss, excuse me, as she flips off Stan, as well as the customers, and quits tchotchkes, as that's her expression. And Peter checks the bank and sees the virus came sooner than 2 years, while Peter and Samir get pissed off at Michael, and Michael says it was your idea to Peter. And Bill has a birthday party with his employees, and everybody gets cake except Milton, as he really wants to burn the building down. And Peter, Michael, and Samir think of a way to give the money back to Initech. And I feel so bad for Milton, as he's been treated like horribly, as he doesn't get a cake nor a paycheck, which was brought up earlier in the film. and moves his desk downstairs. And I really like what Stephen Root does with the character. As remember, this was a story that Mike Judge made up. Michael, Peter, and Samir, while looking up money laundry in the dictionary, and Peter learns Brills learns the Lumberg Drew was talking about was Ron Lumberg until Steve, briefly played by Orlando Jones, knocks on Peter's door and asks if he wants to buy 20 subscriptions to magazines, as they tell him everything. And eventually, Michael and Samir leave Peter because of how bad of a person he is. As Lawrence hears it and doesn't want him to fuck up his life, as he dreams of putting Michael and Samir into prison, not by his choice, I'll say, and writes a note to confession to Initek, and he decides to go to jail, and before he goes to prison says his goodbyes to Joanna when she gets off her new job at Flingers, which is where Peter took her earlier in the movie when they met. As he delivers the message under Bill's office door and tries to get out of it, but he realizes he's fucked. And this is a brave thing to do of Peter, and it still works for a comedy movie released in 1999, as the jokes still hold up, kind of. And the next day comes, and Peter tells Lawrence he's going to prison and is on the way to Initek and sees it burning down, and I believe I know who did it. And if anybody doesn't know, it probably might be Milton, as he did bring it up a long time ago as he walks away from the building while it's burning to the ground. And he did threaten to burn the building a few times throughout the movie, as we move on to Peter getting the job as a construction worker with Lawrence and Michael, and Samir come visit him for a couple of minutes. And Peter loves the construction job with Lawrence as Milton takes a vacation to the Caribbean. And the climax was great, and as this has some unforgettable lines in this movie. But how unforgettable and how great was this movie? Let's talk about it in a rating. I'll give this movie a 8.3 out of 10. The characters are absolutely relatable, and the dialogue being said by these actors are hilarious. And this is a great time at the movies, and it is a hell of a lot of fun. And I'm not usually too big on R-rated comedies, but this one works by writer-director Mike Judge, whom I criticized his Beavis and Butthead movies. But the show is better than the movies are, in my opinion. The score is typical 1990s, as the shots are great for an R-rated comedy about people who hate their jobs to go to work anyways. And this movie is really funny as far as humor goes, is concerned, as Gary Cole is the best character, in my opinion, while Milton, I felt very bad because he was mistreated for this whole movie, as this movie has so many unforgettable lines and script, and this movie works for a comedy that came out in 1999. And this is a great time at the movies, and I learned I would hate working in a place with cubicle spaces. And this movie has so many quotable lines, and at the end of the day, this movie works great. And this is a solid recommendation for this movie, as the performances were great, and I would watch this again and again for the rest of my natural damn life. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining me, and until we ever get to the next one, which I don't think there will be a sequel to this, but I'm talking about in general, I believe you have my stapler.